Hare Krishna and welcome. Today we officially enter the sacred dialogue of the Bhagavad Gita, beginning with the chapter 1, Arjuna Vishada Yoga, or observing the armies on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. This chapter sets the emotional and philosophical stage for everything that follows. It's here, amidst the tension of Kurukshetra, that we see a mighty warrior collapse in doubt, grief, and confusion. But Arjuna's despair isn't a weakness, it's a starting point of transformation. But in many ways, it reflects our own spiritual journey when we pause, question, and finally seek deeper truths. So let's take our first step into the battlefield of the heart and explore the timeless wisdom that begins with the moment of human vulnerability. So let's explore chapter 1. What is the title of this chapter? The title of this chapter is Observing the Armies on the Battlefield of Kurukshetra. So, this chapter is all about observations. The way Arjuna sees the world around him, the people, the sides, and most importantly, the inner battle within himself. But remember, Arjuna is not just Arjun, he represents each one of us. And Krishna is not speaking the Gita to Arjuna alone, he's speaking through Arjuna to all of us. So when Arjuna looks around the battlefield and sees two armies, the good and bad, he's really witnessing the two sides within us all. Sometimes we deal with people who are purely good. Sometimes we deal with the people who are clearly difficult. And sometimes the same person, or even we ourselves, hold both qualities at once. That's the battlefield of life. And that's the Kurukshetra within. Now, the title of the chapter is Arjuna Vishada Yoga. What is Vishad means? Vishad means lamentation, sorrow, grief, or despair. And yoga? Yoga means connection, the spiritual union. How does a despair becomes yoga? Yoga is considered as a positive word. Vishad is a negative word. How does despair becomes yoga? Because Arjuna cries in front of Krishna. His sorrow leads him to surrender. And anything, be it tears, laughter, or effort, when offered in connection to Krishna, becomes yoga. When your pain brings you to God, that pain becomes transformative. And so, this chapter, or this epic chapter, begins with a very telling word. What is the first word? How does this chapter starts? Anybody remembers what is the first word of the Gita? First word is Dhritarashtra, the blind king. So let's ask, how does what does blindness truly mean? Is it physical or is it something deeper? There are people with physical blindness, yet they live inspired lives. Ray Charles, he was a musical genius but blind. Charlie Boswell, he was a champion blind golfer. And there's another name in India. India gave us who? Surdasji, the poet, who, despite being blind, could see Krishna more clearly than anyone else. One day, Pujarijis decided to test Surdasji by dressing Srinathji in only flowers, no clothes. And still, Surdasji composed a poem describing Krishna's beauty from all four directions. Though blind, he saw more than we ever could. So being blind isn't the problem. The problem is when your blindness is used to justify harm, as Dhritarashtra did. He wasn't just blind in his eyes, he was blind in ambition, blind in ethics, and blind in attachment. Let's break down his name. Dhrit means determination. Dhrit. Rashtra means kingdom or land. He was determined, but for land, for control, not for dharma. And when ambition crosses the fine line of dharma, it becomes greed. And greed that harm others is no longer ambition. It's a destruction. So lesson here is one's ambition shouldn't affect oneself or others negatively. I'm reminded of a story. A man saw two brothers. One day he's going through the village. He saw one was drunkard, and he asked, "Oh, why you are like that?" He said, "Oh, I became like this because my father was a drunkard." And then he saw another person who was a police officer, and he said, "Oh, I became like this because my father was a drunkard." And those two, a drunkard and the police officer, are the brothers. So two sons, same father. One followed the example, the other the warning. So in life, we can either serve as a lesson or as a warning. So when Dhritarashtra opens the Gita by asking Sanjaya about, what did he ask first? He says, remember what's the first verse? Mamaka Pandavas Chaiva. So when Dhritarashtra opens the Gita by asking Sanjaya, my sons, Mamaka, and Pandu son, and the sons of Pandu, not once does he say, my nephews. He sees, we see the division in his heart, a heart consumed by favoritism and blindness. And so this chapter 1, begins with a king who is blind, a warrior who's overwhelmed, and a battle that is more than just physical. It is a battle of duty, ethics, family, and self-realization. So let's begin this journey by acknowledging a powerful truth. Every spiritual journey often begins with a doubt. From childhood, we are taught what success looks like, a picture painted by family, friends, school, and society. We work hard to pursue this perfect life, chasing achievements, recognition, comfort, and stability. But then something shifts, we pause, and we begin to wonder, is this all there is? Is this life of goals and gains truly fulfilling? Or is there something deeper? This very questioning, this gentle unrest within, marks the beginning of a higher search. And that's where the Bhagavad Gita begins with Arjuna's doubt, a warrior ready to battle, suddenly paralyzed by inner conflict. He questions everything, his role, his values, the meaning of life itself. And in doing so, Arjuna becomes a mirror for us. Because behind every moment of confusion lies an opportunity of awakening. And that's what chapter 1 invites us into, the battlefield of the mind, where transformation begins. Now we've set the stage for Arjuna's inner struggle. Let's take a closer look how chapter 1 unfolds. To help understand the flow of the chapter, we'll use a simple yet powerful acronym, DOUBT. Each letter stands for a key section of Arjuna's emotion and spiritual journey in the chapter. D. D stands for Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana. We begin with a blind king and his son as they observe the armies, the battlefield. They sets the tone of fear, attachment, and political ambition. Oh, ominous results. Here we hear about the mighty conch shell's blow. Sounds that signal not just the start of the war, but something darker, something foreboding. You, uncertainty. Arjuna asks Krishna to take his chariot in the middle of the battlefield. and what he sees shakes him. B. Bewilderment. His mind reels, his limbs tremble. The great warrior Arjuna is overcome with sorrow and fear. And finally, T. Turning point. This is where Arjuna doubts take full form. He drops his bow and refuses to fight. The stage is now set for Krishna to speak. So that's the arc of chapter 1, a descent into doubt. Don't worry, this is not the end. This is the beginning. So only when heart breaks open, one can divine wisdom enter. So let's explore our first part of the acronym, Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana. In the very first verse, King Dhritarashtra asks, "What did my sons and sons of Pandu do, assembled on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, desirous of war?" Though he's physically blind, the question reveals a deeper blindness, one of a spiritual ignorance and attachment. His use of words, "my sons" versus the sons of Pandu, immediately shows his partiality and inner bias. On the other hand, we see Duryodhana stepping into the spotlight, rallying his army. Despite having a numerous advantage, he's anxious and insecure. His long speech to Dronacharya isn't just a military report. It's filled with pride, politics, and attempt to boost morale. He subtly doubts the loyalty of some of his own allies and is clearly rattled by the strength and unity of the Pandava side. Both Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana are actually blinded not just by birth or pride, but by the deep-rooted material desires and envy. They are focused on possessing a kingdom, not serving it. This sets the tone of entire Gita. When one's vision is clouded by I, me, and mine, conflict and dissatisfaction are inevitable. It is a powerful reminder that true blindness is not just of the eyes, but of the heart and the intellect clouded by attachment and selfish ambition. Ominous results. Despite Duryodhana's boastful speech and apparent confidence, the true turning point begins subtly with the blowing of the conchs. On one side, Duryodhana tries to rally his army with pride and political calculation, but on the other side, Pandavas are supported by Krishna himself. And when they blow their conch, the sound shakes the heart of Kauravas. It's not just a signal of war, it's a spiritual sound filled with righteousness, fearlessness, and divine protection. Krishna blows Panchajanya, Arjuna blows Devadatta, Bhim blows Pondra, like the roar of the lion. The emphasis the, the verses place on these names and sound reveal a deeper truth. This battle is not just physical, it is moral and spiritual. So, what's the key learning for us? Those who stand on the side of the purity and righteousness are always victorious, even if the worldly odds seem against them. Victory is not defined by the weapons and numbers, but by the presence of dharma, righteousness. And one who carries goodness within is never defeated by evil. The ominous signs are not seen in the skies, they are heard in the heart of those who sense the truth that is about to triumph. Uncertainty. As the conch falls silent, something unexpected happened. Arjuna, the great warrior, asked Krishna to drove his chariot between the two armies. Why? Not to check the strategy, not to intimidate the enemy, but to see who has assembled to fight, to see those he must face. And when he looks, he doesn't just see the soldiers. What did he see? He sees he sees teachers, friends, cousins, uncles, all deeply connected by him to him by blood and affection. Suddenly, the mighty warrior becomes deeply human. Emotions stir and his motivation wavers. The weight of the war hits his heart. And that is the moment where Arjuna, one of the greatest fighters of all time, becomes unmotivated. Not because he doubts his skill, but because he questions the purpose. What is the use of the victory, he asks, if it means destroying those I love? That is where the Bhagavad Gita becomes deeply relatable. We all experience moments when our goal suddenly feels empty. Our purpose feels unclear. Our strength is drained by emotion. So, what are the key learnings here? True strength is not the absence of emotion, but the willingness to confront it. Even the greatest heroes have doubts, and it's those doubts that often lead to the deepest transformation. That this is not Arjuna's weakness. This is the beginning of his awakening. Bewilderment. As Arjuna stands in the middle of the battlefield, the reality of war sinks in. What he sees before him is not just the army, but his own family, friends, mentors, and loved ones. And in that moment, something dramatic happens. His body trembles, his skin burns, his bow slips from his hands, his mouth dries up, his mind spins in confusion. That is not physical weakness, it's emotional collapse. Arjuna, the mighty warrior, is now completely bewildered. He asks himself, why should I fight? What will I gain? What's the point of this destruction? In our life, we face moments like this when our values collide with our duties, when the cost of our choices feels overwhelming, when we are frozen between the action and inaction. And so, what's the key reflection? Even the strongest can be overcome by emotion. And that's okay. Acknowledging confusion is not a failure, it's a first step towards clarity. This bewilderment is painful, but it opens the door for Krishna's wisdom to enter. It sets the stage for transformation. Turning point. Now we come to the final section of chapter 1. Turning point. Arjuna, one of the greatest warriors the world has known, now begins to give several reasons why he does not wish to fight. On the surface, they appear noble and compassionate, but they are the symptoms of deep emotional turmoil. He argues, why should I kill my own kinsman for the sake of kingdom? Even if we win, what joy will there be without our loved one to share it with? This act of war will lead to destruction of the family tradition and collapse of society's moral fabric. Women will become unprotected and future generation will be corrupted. And these are the thoughts of a confused mind, one overwhelmed by attachment and sorrow, not guided by dharma. Arjuna's heart is broken and his hands tremble. And finally, in verse 47, the climax of chapter 1, he drops his bow and sits down in his chariot, refusing to fight. And this is the turning point. And from this moment of despair will rise the greatest spiritual dialogue in human history, which is the Bhagavad Gita. So, in this first chapter, we witnessed the physical and emotional setup of battlefield at Kurukshetra, but more importantly, the battlefield of Arjuna's heart. Despite being a skilled warrior, Arjuna is struck by a deep inner conflict, torn between his duty as a Kshatriya and his love for family. This inner turmoil leaves him completely disarmed, overwhelmed, and immobilized. We ended with Arjuna's putting down his bow, not out of fear, but out of despondency. But as we'll see in chapter 2, when everything seems darkest, that's when the light begins to shine. Next session, we'll move to Sankhya Yoga, where Krishna begins to speak. A Bhagwan's gonna be to a Vacha. His divine wisdom will start to lift Arjuna and all of us from confusion to clarity and from grief to knowledge. I'll see you all in my next video. Hare Krishna.